Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with another exhibition quest guide, this time for Mr. and Mrs. Bloodaxe. You get to play their marriage counselor, so have fun with that. Unlike her husband, though, Gunhildr isn't actually on the field. Instead, she supports him with various debuffs. In Phase 1, she targets one of your party members with NP gain down, a tiny curse, and defense down. Now, she also gives her husband a defensive effect, depending on which phase it is. In Phase 1, it's a pretty substantial defense buff, as you can see, even with the damage CE equipped. Uriel is not doing very much damage, and now she's at 1 health. Alright, fuck me. Yeah. You know, occupational hazard when you're fighting a berserker, so now I've scummed on turn 1. Nice. Okay, yeah, that aside, I ought to just go for the stun. As I find out in the course of running this fight, keeping Bloodaxe immobile is, to your advantage, although there is something you have to keep in mind. If Eric Bloodaxe gets charmed at any point, his wife will retaliate with some nasty debuffs. Some very scary looking debuffs, I should say. Just a ton of curse amps. Now here's the thing though, until you accumulate a substantial number of these, even more than just the one stack, you won't actually feel it that much. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, though I would recommend keeping a way of cleansing them off. In a vacuum though, not a huge deal. I go for it here, which means I'm going to eat a bunch of curse amps, but it's not a big deal. Not with those quantities anyway. Oh yes, if you're wondering about the timer buff that's on Eric Bloodaxe, how it works is that if he kills a party member, he gains a tick of charge, but also NP seals himself, so he can't like snowball into a free NP. Here, I decide to go for the Uriel NP, thinking it'll blow him up. As I find out though, that defense buff, pretty substantial. Now, there is a way of actually parrying Gunhildr's support, which removes her, well, most notably it removes the defensive buff that Eric Bloodaxe gets for that turn, because they normally refresh every turn. If Eric Bloodaxe crits, NPs, or kills a party member, Mrs. Bloodaxe will be too distracted to actually help him. She'll be too impressed. So, in the early phases, it's not really worth trying to go for the killer crit. Yeah, listen, if the crit happens, it happens. Then you can just ride the momentum. But taking a party member loss in the first 2 phases is really not advised. I would try to avoid it if you can. Which leaves the third condition, which is just to wait until he NPs, which means his defenses will be down for a turn and you could just blow him up. In this turn, he gets a crit, which thankfully is mitigated by that defense buff, which means I get a clean shot at him. I think another NP would have just done it regardless, but, you know, at this point I don't have a better option for dealing that 130k, so I just go for it. Yeah, if you know what you're doing in this fight, the anti-charm mechanic is less of an issue than you'd think. Oh, and speaking of which, I found out, like actually minutes, before recording this, that Xnaya actually cleared this fight with a very similar team. So, fuck me, I guess, so much for originality. Should have just done the Moriarty clear again. That's what I did on stream. Very messy run, but pretty fun. But, you know, in for a penny, in for a pound, I recorded the footage. Let's just go for it. So the idea behind this team is that Uriel does all the heavy lifting, and in combination with Jean, she can lock up Eric Bloodaxe, and, critically, Jean's NP serves double duty. Triple duty, really. First of all, it parries Bloodaxe's NP, and keeps your team alive. Second of all, it cleanses any debuffs. Yeah, the curses are annoying, but they're not as problematic as the defense, attack, and NP gain down buffs. Which, by the way, there is now an attack buff. During Phase 2, Bloodaxe's wife starts putting an attack down on your servants, and Eric himself gets an evade instead of that defense buff. But, you know, the conditions to deactivate it are still the same. While there are servants that can just get through it with an invuln pierce or a sure hit, you don't have to run that kind of servant. Just, you know, using the mechanics will get you by just fine. Here I stall for time using Jean and Waver, just to keep Eric Bloodaxe immobile until he's at his NP turn. This is the advantage of giving me plenty of time to build up a Uriel NP. Now you don't have to use Waver, you can run a different defensive servant like Mash or something. It means you're more dependent on getting Jean's NP up faster, but it's not absolutely necessary. For my part, I like running Waver because he's a charge accelerator, and there is nothing quite as unfun in this game as waiting for your art servant to charge from 0 to 100% on turn 1. Or from turn 1, really. Yeah. It's one of the big reasons why I don't like using Tamamo teams for exhibition quests and stuff. Like, the longer it takes you to get to your first NP, just the more hassle it is. Alright, and here we go. Bloodaxe takes a bunch of damage. Not quite as Holbar, but with a little bit of help from my allies, I'm able to mess him up quite badly. Now here, he gains an on-hit buff. And when he attacks someone, it'll reduce his health by like 1,000. It's not really a relevant amount. But he gains an attack buff, which is the real problem, because this is the point where he really starts threatening your front line, even without crits. So here, I opt to just keep him chained as long as possible, because I really don't want to mess with that. And yeah, the rest of the fight is really just me rinsing and repeating. Also, the buff that Eric Bloodaxe gets in this phase, the defensive buff, is actually that he takes like next to no damage. Just massive damage reduction. Not really much of a point in trying to attack him through it, so I wouldn't recommend that. Just, you know, play the mechanics. In this phase, some teams can actually opt to just sack members against him, especially if you're running taunches and stuff. That works too if you have huge deeps. But I want to show that a grinding attritional team can actually do this without too much difficulty. I'm fairly liberal about using Jean's NP in my various stuns because, again, just locking him up for those turns is really important. The extra single target debuff that Gunhilda gets in this fight is, or I'm sorry, in this phase, is like a recovery down, health recovery down. Not a huge factor at this point. Health recovery in this team comp is really just to rebound from curse damage, which is, you know, not too important. Like, even with that reduction, Waver is getting by just fine. Yeah, in this, yeah, here I'm not sure what I should do. I debate using Waver's charge reduction. But then I don't know what I'm thinking at this point. I guess I decided to just chance it. Build a little bit of charge for everyone. I guess I was looking for a Jean Arts card. You know, there wasn't one there. Okay, so now I'm in deep shit. Because Bloodaxe is at full charge. And Jean is not. So at this point, I have the option of either reducing his charge with Uriel, or accelerating Jean's charge. Not an ideal use, but again, I don't really need Jean's crits to get this done. I'm sorry, Jean's crits? Yeah, I don't really need Uriel's crits to get this done. In that particular chain, I have to start with a quick guard. just so I can build up a few stars for the next turn, in case I do have to crit. But yeah, this team, very stable. Up until like the final turn or so of the battle, everyone stays relatively healthy. Which works quite well for me. Aside from that mishap right at the very start, Bloodaxe's damage output has not been a huge issue, although, as you can see, he's getting quite a few stacks. Alright, now here, his defenses are down, which means I can attack with Uriel. I believe I use Unrelenting Formation for a bit of extra damage. Although, yeah, while this is going on, just a bit of rinse and repeat, I want to ask you guys a question. Do you guys prefer, like, the sort of lower econ? Like, I realize this team comp is not low econ, that's 2 5-star servants. But, you know, they're ones you could pull off your friends list, and as far as 5 stars go, they're among the more common ones. So do you prefer seeing teams like this? You know, lower econ attackers like Deermud, Uriel, stuff like that? Or do you like the really big dick clears with characters like Kintoki and Musashi Zerk? So yeah, let me know in the comments. Because if I can just Unga Bunga whale my way through everything, believe me, I'll do it. You know, I never did find out if Chen Gong killing his allies will trigger the dead ally condition, but I'm pretty sure Bloodaxe himself has to do it. Real shame. Yeah, backline, though, has not been getting very much mileage. Actually, you know what occurred to me? I bet Lobo would be pretty good for this fight, huh? Well, you'd have to keep him alive, but, you know. Mess up those first 2 phases pretty good. Man, I actually didn't think I'd be having this much dead air. Yeah, that's the problem with running these grinder teams. You know, it's really just rinse and repeat, isn't it? Here, I'm trying to decide whether it's worth using Jean's NP right now. And I think I do. Yeah, I do go for it, because I see the arts chain. NP gain down, not a particular issue. Once I'm able to just cleanse that stuff off. There is a dog barking outside. Hope that doesn't get on the audio. Why am I looking at this guy's skills again? Oh, I must be holding it for in case I need to look it up. Do I use that buff on John? No. I opt to invuln Uriel. It's an... In retrospect, that's a really strange play. I could have just scummed it if Uriel got hit. But I decided to be a little frivolous, I suppose. And here I realize a little bit of a problem. Jean's NP is not up. Waver's is, though. And so I use Discerning Eye on Waver to get his NP back up. Try to fish for that Jean NP. Which, with that much charge, I should have. And here, he goes fucking beast mode. Look at that, 24k hit. And boom, 11k buster card. Not the way I intended to do this, but you know what? Either way, he loses his defensive buff, which means Uriel has a straight shot at him. I don't need Lord Camelot in front, but I do it anyway just for style points. Insurance probably, but it's not necessary. Fucking flexing a K-scope mash. Oh yeah, that's me alright. I believe I've had Jolter in the final slot, just in case. But turns out this team, pretty stable. Gets the job done just fine. Alright, that said, like if you like the video, subscribe for more, and stick around for more Gilfest coverage. See you later everyone, have a good one.